Welcome to another life-changing video from our channel, Life Fact Daily, on why Gen Z could be the wealthiest generation by breaking the existing pattern. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share our channel for more informative videos like this. Every generation is shaped by the world they inherit. Each comes into adulthood with its own unique set of opportunities, struggles, and cultural narratives about money, success, and the meaning of wealth. For baby boomers, the post-World War II era was one of expansion and optimism. The economy was growing, wages were climbing, and the American dream was alive in almost every corner of society. Owning a house was attainable. A college education was affordable. And for many, one steady job could sustain a family, cover health care, and provide enough savings to retire comfortably. Wealth, in many ways, was tied to stability and predictability. Gen X, who followed, inherited a slightly different landscape. They were the first to grow up in a world where globalization, computers, and the early internet began reshaping industries. They learned to adapt quickly, to be independent, and to build careers in environments that were becoming more competitive. While not as secure as their parents' world, Gen X still had strong access to corporate ladders, affordable housing in many markets, and traditional forms of wealth accumulation like pensions and inheritance. Then came millennials, and this is where the cracks in the system became undeniable. Born between the early 1980s and mid-1990s, millennials entered adulthood during a time of financial turbulence. Many graduated into the 2008 financial crisis, saddled with record-breaking student loan debt, facing skyrocketing housing prices, and competing in an economy that was shifting from stable, long-term jobs to precarious gig work and contract employment. For millennials, the script of work hard, go to school, get a job, and life will reward you simply didn't match their reality. A college degree no longer guaranteed upward mobility. Homeownership became a distant dream for many, and the corporate ladders their parents climbed often turned into revolving doors of layoffs and instability. That brings us to Gen Z, the generation born roughly between the late 1990s and early 2010s. They've been labeled everything from screen-obsessed to socially conscious to disruptors, depending on who you ask. But one thing is clear. Gen Z is stepping into adulthood at one of the most transformative moments in human history. Why does this matter? Because unlike past generations who inherited existing rules for wealth building, Gen Z is entering a world where the rules are being rewritten in real time. The old formula is broken. The formula that worked for boomers, study hard, graduate, get a stable job, buy a house, retire with a pension, doesn't exist in the same way anymore. Even Gen X, and certainly millennials, discovered this the hard way. Housing, once considered a straightforward path to wealth, is now out of reach for millions due to inflated prices, stagnant wages, and limited supply. Pensions, once a guaranteed retirement safety net, are nearly extinct, replaced with individual retirement accounts that shift the risk from corporations to individuals. Healthcare costs continue to rise, and education, which was supposed to be an investment in the future, has become a financial burden for many families. So what happens when an entire generation realizes the old playbook no longer works? They don't keep trying to play the old game. They invent a new one. This is the core of why Gen Z may become the wealthiest generation in history. Not because the path is easier, but because they're refusing to walk the same broken paths of the past. The mindset shift. Mindset is the seed of every form of wealth. If you grow up believing that success is tied to climbing corporate ladders, you will spend your life chasing promotions. If you grow up believing that wealth is tied to ownership, creativity, and leverage, you will look for ways to own assets, build audiences, and create value that scales. Gen Z is the first generation to come of age in a world where entrepreneurship is visible, accessible, and even celebrated on a massive scale. They have grown up seeing teenagers make millions on YouTube, 20-somethings become self-made millionaires with e-commerce stores, and ordinary people leverage social media to turn side hustles into empires. This matters. Exposure changes expectations. When a 15-year-old sees that someone their age can earn more in 1 year online than their parents do in a decade, it rewires their brain. It makes them ask different questions. Instead of what job should I get, they begin to ask, what can I create? Instead of how do I survive, they start to think, how do I scale? The wealthy have always understood the principle of leverage, using money, assets, or networks to multiply wealth. For previous generations, this kind of leverage was hidden behind gated institutions, investment banks, venture capital firms, old boy networks. Gen Z, however, is growing up with leverage at their fingertips. A smartphone with internet access is, in itself, a form of leverage. The collapse of traditional security. Another reason Gen Z may ultimately build more wealth is because they don't have illusions about job security. Millennials were promised stability and saw it vanish. Gen Z grew up watching their parents struggle during the Great Recession, hearing about layoffs, seeing families lose homes, and watching debt crush opportunities. As a result, they are less likely to blindly trust corporations or governments to secure their future. They know instinctively that retirement won't be handed to them. They understand that depending on a single income source is risky. And this awareness, though it may come from witnessing hardship, creates an advantage. When you know no one is coming to save you, you start planning differently. You start looking for multiple streams of income, for ways to diversify your earnings, for opportunities to own rather than rent your future. The perfect storm of timing. Every generation has opportunities, but timing matters. For baby boomers, timing meant entering adulthood during a housing and stock market boom. For Gen Z, timing means stepping into adulthood at the exact moment when the digital economy, artificial intelligence, decentralized finance, and remote work are converging. These aren't small shifts, they're seismic. Each one alone could redefine how wealth is created. Together, they represent an entirely new economic landscape. And Gen Z is the first generation to navigate adulthood fully within this landscape, not as outsiders adjusting to change, but as natives who have never known anything different. This combination of broken old systems, new digital leverage, mindset shifts, and unique timing sets the stage. It explains why, against all odds, Gen Z may very well emerge as the richest generation in history. But this is only the beginning. Because while the setup reveals the broken patterns of the past, the real story begins with the opportunities Gen Z now has at their disposal. Opportunities previous generations couldn't even dream of. And that's where we turn next. The digital goldmine. We have explained how the old rules of wealth are broken, where the new wealth is being created, and why Gen Z is uniquely positioned to seize it. The key word is digital. For the first time in human history, wealth is no longer limited by geography, physical resources, or even traditional gatekeepers. Today, wealth is created through data, platforms, networks, and digital assets. And no generation understands this reality better than Gen Z, because for them, the digital world isn't a new frontier. It's simply home, growing up online. Think about this. Baby boomers were introduced to television when they were young. Gen X grew up as personal computers entered the home. Millennials saw the rise of the internet, cell phones, and eventually social media in their teenage and young adult years. Gen Z, they were born into it. They don't remember a world without smartphones. They don't remember a world without social media. The idea of being offline feels as strange to them as the idea of living without electricity might feel to some of us. This matters because fluency creates opportunity. Just as being fluent in a language lets you navigate a culture more easily, being digitally fluent lets Gen Z navigate the global economy more naturally. Older generations often use technology as a tool. Gen Z uses it as an extension of themselves. That difference is subtle but powerful. It means they're faster at spotting opportunities, more comfortable experimenting with digital tools, and more creative in applying them. The new business landscape. Let's take business as an example. For previous generations, starting a business meant high upfront costs. You needed office space, employees, capital, and inventory. You were limited to local customers or, at best, regional markets. Scaling took years, sometimes decades. For Gen Z, the barriers to entry have collapsed. Want to sell products? You can open a Shopify store today, dropship from a global supplier, and advertise on TikTok for a few dollars. Want to offer services? You can sign up on Fiverr or Upwork and reach clients worldwide without leaving your bedroom. Want to publish content? You can start a YouTube channel, Facebook, TikTok account, or podcast with nothing more than your smartphone. Want to design and sell merchandise? Platforms like Printful and Teespring handle production and shipping. You just provide the design. This is not a small change. It's a revolution. In the past, wealth creation required permission from banks, investors, or established networks. Today, Gen Z doesn't need permission. They need creativity, consistency, and the ability to navigate platforms they've been using since childhood. Attention is as valuable as currency. One of the most underestimated forms of wealth today is attention. In the digital economy, attention is not just a byproduct. It is the currency itself. Think about companies like Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, or TikTok. These platforms are free to use because your attention is the product being sold to advertisers. Gen Z understands this intuitively. Many of them have grown up watching peers build entire careers by capturing attention online. Influencers, content creators, streamers, and podcasters aren't celebrities in the old sense. They're everyday people who learned how to turn attention into income. For a teenager in 1995, the dream might have been becoming a movie star or professional athlete, roles that required luck, connections, or extraordinary talent. For a teenager in 2025, the dream could be becoming a YouTuber, TikToker, or e-commerce entrepreneur, roles that require skill, yes, but are far more accessible. And here's the important part. When you own attention, you own leverage. A creator with 500,000 followers doesn't just have fans. They have a distribution channel. They can sell products, launch businesses, or influence markets. That distribution channel is an asset, one that can generate cash flow, open doors to partnerships, and scale with almost no marginal cost. Older generations might roll their eyes at influencers, but make no mistake. Influence is wealth in the digital age, and Gen Z knows how to wield it. Understand digital skills as assets. Beyond personal brands, Gen Z has access to a marketplace of digital skills that can be monetized instantly. Think about the skills in demand today. Video editing, graphic design, copywriting, coding, social media management, digital marketing, data analysis, AI prompt engineering. These aren't future skills. They're present-day income streams. And many Gen Zers are self-taught through YouTube tutorials, online courses, or even TikTok explainers. They don't need formal degrees to monetize their skills. They need a Wi-Fi connection, a portfolio, and the confidence to pitch clients. Compare this to older generations, where acquiring marketable skills often required years of formal education, thousands of dollars in tuition, and rigid career paths. Gen Z can learn, adapt, and earn in real time. The global marketplace. Another massive advantage. Gen Z is the first generation to grow up in a truly globalized digital marketplace. A teenager in Amsterdam can sell to a customer in Los Angeles. A coder in Manila can freelance for a startup in Berlin. A designer in Sao Paulo can collaborate with a team in New York, all in real time, all without borders. This means Gen Z is not limited by local economies. They are not constrained by their immediate environment in the same way previous generations were. Even if opportunities are scarce in their physical location, digital access gives them entry into global opportunities. The digital gold mine isn't just about technology, it's about access. And access changes everything. The rise of AI and automation. Now let's talk about the most game-changing development of all, artificial intelligence. AI is disrupting industries faster than any technology in history. It can write, design, code, analyze, and even make business decisions. For some, this is terrifying. For Gen Z, it's an opportunity. Why? Because they're not clinging to old ways of doing things. They're willing to experiment with AI tools, to integrate them into their workflows, and to see them not as threats, but as multipliers. A Gen Zer who learns to use AI effectively can do the work of 5 people. They can scale businesses faster, reduce costs, and create content or products at speeds that would have been impossible even 5 years ago. AI isn't replacing Gen Z. Gen Z is learning to use AI to replace inefficiency. And that mindset creates wealth. Understand. Digital assets and ownership. The final piece of the digital gold mine is ownership. For previous generations, ownership meant physical property, land, houses, or businesses. For Gen Z, ownership can also mean digital assets, a monetized YouTube channel, a viral TikTok account, intellectual property like ebooks or courses, NFTs or digital art, cryptocurrency portfolios, online communities or membership platforms. These assets may seem unconventional to older generations, but they generate income, they appreciate in value, and they can even be sold, just like traditional businesses. The key is this. Gen Z doesn't just consume digital platforms. They own pieces of them. First, digital natives of wealth. Gen Z is stepping into adulthood at a time when wealth is being redefined. No longer limited by geography, traditional institutions, or physical resources, wealth is increasingly digital, built on platforms, fueled by attention, scaled by AI, and distributed globally. And Gen Z, as the first true digital natives, are uniquely equipped to mine this gold. For older generations, the digital world is a tool. For Gen Z, it is the world. That distinction is why they may not just survive the future economy, but thrive in it. And if Part 2 explains the opportunities, Part 3 explains how Gen Z is leveraging them. Not just to make money, but to invest early and differently, setting the stage for long-term wealth on a scale previous generations could only dream of. Gen Z are investing early and differently. I've explained how Gen Z is surrounded by unprecedented digital opportunities, why this generation has the chance to turn those opportunities into lasting wealth. Because making money is one thing, growing it, protecting it, and multiplying it is another. And this is where Gen Z may have their greatest edge. They're investing earlier and differently than any generation before them. Underscore. In the past, investing was a privilege. For most of modern history, investing wasn't accessible to everyday people. Buying stocks required a broker, high minimums, and expensive fees. Real estate required down payments, credit history, and connections. Starting a business often meant borrowing from banks, which favored established players. In short, wealth building was gated. If you weren't already wealthy, the system was designed to keep you out. Baby boomers benefited because they grew up in a time when salaries alone could build wealth. Gen X managed to navigate an evolving system with opportunities still somewhat intact. Millennials, however, faced the collapse of those systems. But here's the twist. Millennial struggles created tools that Gen Z now benefits from. Fintech platforms, commission-free trading, fractional investing, crypto exchanges, and decentralized finance exploded in response to the need for more accessible investing. Gen Z was born right into that world. For them, investing isn't a privilege. It's an option available at their fingertips from their very first paycheck or even their first allowance. The power of early compounding. Let's talk about the math of wealth for a moment. Compounding is the process of earning returns not just on your original investment, but also on the returns those investments generate. Over time, it creates exponential growth. For example, if you invest $200 a month starting at age 18 and the market averages just 8% annually, by age 65 you could have over $1.2 million. If you wait until age 30 to start the same $200 monthly investment, you'll end up with less than $500,000. The difference? Starting earlier. Gen Z has the advantage of time. They're learning about investing in their teens, and many are beginning before they even turn 20. That gives their money decades to compound. Previous generations didn't start investing until their 30s or 40s. Gen Z could have 15 to 20 years of a head start. That's a massive wealth multiplier. Fractional shares, breaking the gatekeepers. One of the greatest innovations of modern finance is the ability to buy fractional shares. In the past, if you wanted to invest in Amazon, you had to buy one full share. That could cost hundreds or thousands of dollars. For someone just starting out, that was intimidating or even impossible. Today, Gen Z can buy $1 worth of Amazon, Apple, or Tesla stock. No barriers, no excuses. This not only democratizes access to wealth, it changes behavior. When you know you can start investing with whatever you have, you stop waiting. You build the habit early, and habits create outcomes. Underscore. Cryptocurrency and Web3. Here's where Gen Z truly separates themselves. While older generations debated whether crypto was real, Gen Z grew up using it, trading it, and building on it. For them, Bitcoin, Ethereum, NFTs, and decentralized finance aren't exotic. They're familiar. Crypto represents both high risk and high reward. But more importantly, it represents a new way of thinking about money. It teaches Gen Z about decentralization, ownership, and the power of systems that operate outside of traditional banks and governments. Yes, crypto markets are volatile, but volatility also creates opportunity. Many young people who experimented with crypto in their teens or early 20s have already seen firsthand the potential of early adoption. And even if they don't all become crypto millionaires, they've gained financial education that older generations never had at their age. Passive income and asset ownership. Gen Z is also redefining how they think about income. Older generations were taught to rely on one job. Gen Z knows one income stream is fragile. They're building multiple. This could mean running a YouTube channel that generates ad revenue, selling digital products like ebooks or courses, renting out digital real estate in the form of domain names or NFT land, building automated e-commerce stores, investing in dividend-paying stocks or ETFs. The principle is the same. Money should work for you, not just come from you. This mindset is critical because it shifts focus from working harder to building smarter. And once a generation embraces ownership over consumption, wealth follows. Financial education in the palm of their hands. Another major edge for Gen Z is access to free financial education. Just like this one you're listening to. Baby boomers often relied on financial advisors, books, or traditional schooling, limited, expensive, and often outdated sources. Gen Z has YouTube, TikTok, podcasts, and online communities where millions share lessons about investing, saving, and entrepreneurship in real time. They don't need to wait for a college finance course. They can learn how to build a stock portfolio on YouTube. They don't need to hire a CPA to learn about taxes. They can follow experts on TikTok. They don't need a Wall Street mentor. They can join Discord groups where strategies are shared daily. Knowledge that was once hoarded by elites is now democratized. And knowledge compounds just like money. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share our channel for more informative videos like this. As we continue on why Gen Z could be the wealthiest generation with risk tolerance and experimentation. Gen Z also approaches investing with a higher risk tolerance. Part of this comes from youth. They have more time to recover from mistakes. But part of it comes from mindset. They've seen that the old safe paths aren't safe at all. A corporate job can disappear overnight. A degree doesn't guarantee wealth. Housing markets can crash, so they're more willing to experiment, to try crypto, to flip NFTs, to build side hustles, to fail fast and learn. And here's the paradox. By being more willing to take risks, they may actually secure wealth faster. Because every failure teaches and every win compounds. Underscore. Redefining what wealth looks like. Another powerful shift is that Gen Z doesn't just measure wealth in money. They measure it in freedom, flexibility, and ownership. For them, being rich doesn't necessarily mean driving a luxury car or owning a giant house. It might mean working remotely from anywhere in the world, having the freedom to pursue passion projects, or building a business that sustains them without requiring 60-hour work weeks. This matters because wealth is as much about mindset as it is about numbers. When you define wealth as freedom, you pursue strategies that create sustainable, long-term assets. You don't just chase status symbols, you build systems. Underscore. The shift from consumers to investors. Here's perhaps the most important distinction. Older generations were raised as consumers. Advertisements taught them to buy more, spend more, and live on credit. Gen Z, however, is being raised as investors. Every time they see someone profit from owning a stock, a crypto coin, or a digital asset, it reinforces the idea that ownership creates wealth. This doesn't mean they're immune to consumerism, but they're more aware of it. And awareness is power. Gen Z are the investor generation. Gen Z isn't waiting until their 30s or 40s to think about investing. They're starting in their teens and early 20s. They're leveraging tools like fractional shares, crypto, and fintech apps to build wealth earlier. They're diversifying income streams, embracing risk, and redefining what it means to be rich. Most importantly, they're not locked out of the game. They've been given the keys earlier than any generation before them. And with time on their side, compounding as their ally, and access to education at their fingertips, they have the potential to build wealth on an unprecedented scale. This is why many experts believe Gen Z may ultimately be the first generation in decades to flip the script, from struggling under broken systems to rewriting the rules entirely. But the story isn't complete yet, because even with all these advantages, the question remains, what will Gen Z do with this power? Will they simply build personal wealth, or will they redefine wealth itself for society? The big picture, why it matters. We've explored the setup, the digital gold mine, and the ways Gen Z is investing earlier and differently. But the real question remains, why does it matter? Why should we care if Gen Z becomes the richest generation in history? Because wealth isn't just about money. It shapes culture, politics, innovation, and the future of society itself. If Gen Z becomes the wealthiest generation, the world will look very different than it does today. The ripple effect of wealth. Wealth is power. It influences who makes decisions, what industries thrive, and what values dominate culture. For baby boomers, wealth meant suburban expansion, consumerism, and corporate growth. For millennials, the struggle for wealth meant delayed families, urban living, and the rise of the gig economy. For Gen Z, wealth will likely mean something new entirely. This generation doesn't just want to get rich. They want to get rich differently. They want wealth that aligns with their values, flexibility, inclusivity, sustainability, and freedom. And when an entire generation channels wealth toward those values, society shifts. Gen Z are redefining success. For previous generations, success was measured by traditional milestones. The house in the suburbs, the stable corporate job, the retirement at 65. But Gen Z has different benchmarks. Success might mean working remotely while traveling the world. It might mean having time to focus on mental health, family, or passion projects. It might mean financial freedom at 40, not retirement at 65. If Gen Z becomes the wealthiest generation, these new definitions of success will ripple outward. The dream will no longer be a white picket fence. The dream will be freedom, time freedom, location freedom, financial freedom. That shift in culture could influence everything from housing markets to job design to how companies structure their benefits. Wealth with a social conscience. Another critical difference. Gen Z is more socially conscious than any generation before them. They grew up in the era of climate change awareness, social justice movements, and global crises shared instantly online. As a result, they don't just want wealth for themselves. They want wealth that makes an impact. That could mean investing in sustainable companies, supporting businesses that align with their ethics, building startups that solve global challenges, not just chase profits, using their platforms to advocate for change. If Gen Z becomes the richest generation, they won't just buy more. They'll shape industries by choosing where their money flows. Companies that ignore ethics, sustainability, or inclusivity may find themselves abandoned in favor of brands that reflect Gen Z's values. In other words, Gen Z's wealth could accelerate not just economic change, but cultural and environmental change too. The democratization of opportunity. Another reason this matters is because Gen Z's path to wealth is more democratic than ever before. In the past, wealth was concentrated in a few hands: big corporations, old money families, or individuals who played by gate-kept financial systems. Gen Z is proving that wealth can come from anywhere. A kid with a laptop, a gamer streaming to millions, a teenager selling digital art, or a freelancer connecting with clients worldwide. This democratization of opportunity doesn't just benefit individuals, it benefits society. When more people have access to wealth, innovation accelerates. More problems get solved. More voices are heard. Imagine what happens when millions of young people, not just a handful of elites, control meaningful capital. New industries rise. Old ones are disrupted. Wealth no longer flows in one direction, it circulates. Challenges and cautions, nothing come without a price. Of course, this isn't guaranteed. For Gen Z to truly become the richest generation, they must navigate challenges. Economic volatility. Digital assets like crypto can crash as fast as they rise. Distraction versus focus. The same internet that creates opportunities also creates endless distractions. Financial literacy gaps. While many are learning early, others may fall prey to scams, debt, or poor money management. Inequality within Gen Z. Not every young person has equal access to technology, education, or supportive environments. These are real risks. But unlike past generations, Gen Z is aware of them. And awareness is the first step toward adaptation. The potential to break generational curses. Another reason this matters: Gen Z may be the first generation in decades to reverse generational decline. Millennials were often described as the first generation expected to be worse off financially than their parents. Rising debt, stagnant wages, and unaffordable housing created a cycle of struggle. Gen Z has the chance to break that cycle, not by following old rules, but by rewriting them. By creating wealth digitally, by investing earlier, by diversifying income, and by prioritizing ownership, they can break free of financial traps that held back millennials. This doesn't just uplift individuals, it uplifts families. Gen Z wealth builders can support parents, siblings, and communities. They can become the first generation in decades to pass down not just debt, but assets. The redefinition of retirement. If Gen Z becomes the richest generation, retirement itself may be redefined. Why wait until 65 if you can achieve financial independence at 35 or 40? Why think of retirement as stopping work if you can instead design a life where work is optional? Gen Z's wealth could normalize concepts like FIRE, financial independence, retire early, remote work lifestyles, and nonlinear careers. Instead of the traditional trajectory of education, work, retirement, life may look more like cycles of work, rest, travel, and reinvention. This has profound implications for mental health, creativity, and innovation. A generation that doesn't burn out chasing jobs has more energy to solve big problems. Why this matters for the world. Finally, this isn't just about Gen Z. If they become the wealthiest generation, everyone else is affected. Economies, new industries will grow, old ones will die. Politics, wealth gives influence, and Gen Z will demand policies that align with their values. Culture, success stories will look different. Less about corporations, more about creators, entrepreneurs, and digital pioneers. Families, generational wealth can flow downward, meaning future children inherit assets instead of debt. Gen Z's wealth won't exist in isolation. It will reshape the global economy. So, why does it matter if Gen Z becomes the richest generation? Because wealth isn't just personal, it's transformational. It changes how societies function, how industries grow, and how futures are built. Gen Z is not just inheriting the world, they're rewriting it. With digital fluency, early investing habits, and a mindset focused on freedom and impact, they may flip decades of decline and emerge not only as the richest generation, but also as the most influential. The question isn't whether they can. The question is whether they will. Because if they do, the history books won't just call them the richest. They'll call them the generation that redefined wealth itself. For more informative videos like this, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share our channel. Life Fact Daily.